Welcome to this presentation of RDB Connect, Remote Database Access from ProData. RDB Connect allows you to access remote databases including MySQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, non-iSeries, and many more. It enables you to actually work outside the box, which means access data cross-platform real-time on remote systems, easily import data from remote systems. It gives you a set of powerful APIs that will give you access to all the remote data. You can download from our website. If you go to prodatacomputer.com, there's a button for download. Select RDB Connect and fill in the information, and you can download RDB Connect. That is a 30-day trial. It is fully functional. Includes the entire package. It will just cease to work after 30 days. You do need IO sysconfig to install RDB Connect. If you have questions about the authority, you might want to contact your system administrator. Let's get started with RDB Connect. RDB Connect consists of a few components. First of all, there will be a subsystem called the RDB subsystem. The RDB subsystem will contain at minimum 2 jobs. The first job being the RDB admin job. This job is the administrator that controls the starting and stopping of the actual connections. The second being the RDB Connect, which is the actual job that connects to the remote system. This can be one or many jobs. You need to have a job for each user that wishes to connect to the remote system. Okay. So first, before we get started, let's make sure we have RDB in our library list. The RDB library is called RDB20. It's for version 2. If it is not in your library list, simply use Edit Library List and make sure it is added. If you need updates to the RDB system, there is a command called RDB PTF that will grab any updates for your system. It comes to our system, verifies your machine, validates the date of your installation, and gives you only the objects that are needed. So it is a PTF process. So let's start with the configuration of RDB. RDB config command will give you the manage remote system screen. If you look at the top of the screen, the first thing is number of RDB jobs. By default, this is shipped with the value of 1. The number of jobs you place there will be how many connections can be made simultaneously to the remote system. You can have as many jobs as you would like. They're just going to be the number of jobs in the subsystem. The turn tracing on comes default shipped as no. This is a flag that is used by our technical support department to determine when problems occur. We will have you set this flag to yes, and then provide us with a trace log that is generated. This helps in the solving of issues. RDB Connect timeout is the length of time we will wait for a RDB Connect job to become available. So if you only have one job running and 2 people are trying to access it, one will get it and the other one will wait a maximum of 30 seconds, and then they will get a message saying there is no connection available. So you'll see here we have a couple of servers already listed. These are our connections. So let's say if I want to add a connection, I can press F6 to add a connection. I need to define my remote database ID. This is just a name that you assign it for reference purposes. You can give it a description, and then you must assign it the database type. Now the type of database, there are 5 available currently. As we add additional ones, they will be marked here as well. The IP address is either an IP address or a location name. So if on your system you have a name available that is tied, let's say, to a IP address, so that you don't have to hard code the IP address. So if it changes, you don't have to worry about it. You can just put in the name as well. Okay. Port number can be left blank. It is a there are defaults for each one of the types of servers. If your system varies from the default, you will need to populate this port number. For a list of port numbers, you can check our documentation. Catalog and service is dependent on, again, the database. MySQL does not require this. Oracle, MS SQL, and DB2 do require it. Schema is required by pretty much all databases. Username and password are optional entries. If you do not specify them here, they must be specified at execution time or at connection time. If you wish to update one, just select it. You can do for update. So here you'll see I have the Northwind database on SQL Server defined. I want to show you one thing here. On the username, if you use domain name based user IDs, you can simply put the domain name and a slash and then the user ID, and that will give you your connection. You can test your connection by simply placing a 9 next to the server name and pressing enter. If a valid connection happens, it will tell you at the bottom, connection established. Okay. These connections are created as objects. If you wish to edit or prevent access to remote systems, you can do it at an object level by simply placing a 7 next to the server definition and then restricting authority based on either group profiles or user profiles. Okay. Now we will look at some of the commands of RDB. The first one being the RDB tables command. The tables command will give you a list of all the available tables available to you. Now remember, tables, just like on an iSeries or System I, the tables can be restricted by user ID. So based on the user ID and password that you are using, it'll show you the list of tables that are available. If you need to override the user ID and password from the configuration screen, each one of the commands has a user ID and password parameter. Otherwise, the default of *config will pull the user ID and password from the configuration. By hitting enter here, I went across to the SQL Server and grabbed the list of all the tables. So now I know I have a table called customers on the remote system. So let's go ahead and look at what fields customer has. So there's a command called RDB fields. For RDB fields, you actually have to do a SQL statement. So we will select L fields from, and of course this statement must match the standards of the remote database. So in SQL Server case, this is the format of a select statement. So we'll type that in and hit enter, and it will give us the fields listings from the remote database called customers. You can see here, this is the field name on each of the remote database fields, and here are the types. So customer ID is type in char. There's in varchars as well. Usage being both, as in it is both a readable and updatable field. There is a null capable, and then on the end here you'll see this is how they would translate to a System I database. So the customer ID would come across as an alphabetic 5 bytes in length, where the company name would come across alphabetic 40 bytes in length. Okay. Different databases have different field types. So let's look at another table here called orders from the same database. And you'll see here I have some different fields, integers, date timestamps, money fields, and then of course how they translate to again, system I fields, money would translate as a signed numeric. The first field here is the one I wanted to show you. It is a integer identity. Okay, that is a, in the case of SQL Server, is a field that is generated. It's a identity number. So you'll see that the usage is input only. You cannot write to that field or update that field. Okay, it will come across as a signed numeric, 10 bytes in length. So let's go ahead and pull some data from our remote system. And if you want to do that command-based, you can do it using the RDB import command. Now again, you must use a valid select statement. So let's go ahead and grab all the records from the customer's database on SQL Server. And I'm going to go ahead and create a file, and we're going to create a file in Qtemp, let's say, and we'll call it cust. Okay, so by hitting enter here, I'm going to go across to the remote system, grab the definition of the database customers, create a file that will accommodate the data from that database, and then bring the data across. If I wanted to selectively pull the data, I could do a where clause here and choose where the country is US, for example, and I pull only the US customers. So that is a possibility. Here I'm going to pull all the records though. Okay, by hitting enter, it goes across and pulled all the records from the customer's database into ours. I'll just go ahead and use DBU here, another great product from ProData, to take a look at that file so we can see what exactly came across. You'll see we pulled each one of the fields, customer ID, company name, contact, so on, from the remote database, and we brought them over into this system. So this is now a local system I database. You can do this in a batch process, for example. Say you want to pull records over for the from a day's orders, pull them over and process them once a day. You could do that. Here, you can pull into a local database and process the local database, completely in batch. So that is the command side of RDB. Let's talk about the programmatic side of RDB. RDB comes shipped with a service program, and that service program can then be used in RPG or COBOL or C or whatever your high-level language you're using on the System I. So first, let's look at an example of using the RPG to simply read records from a remote database. I add a couple of, by the way, RDB 2.0 contains a source file called RDB SRC. You will find these examples, as well as the prototypes for the service program functions in that source file. Okay, so it is available to you. This is after installation. You'll find the RDB source file in the RDB 2.0 library. The example program we'll look at first. You'll see I added some HSpecs at the top of the program. These are two of them are required. One of mine I prefer to do. The top one is that one. Required are the default activation group of no. You can either put these in as HSpecs or during your compile, and you will need a binding directory of RDB 2000. RDB 2000 binding directory exists in the RDB 2.0 library. If you do not, again, place on the HSpec, you must do it at compile time. You'll need to copy in the prototypes for the functions. Again, those are in the RDB 2.0 library, RDB source file, and they're called RDB Proto. So, first thing we'll need to do is make a connection to our remote database. We're going to do that using a function called RDB Connect. RDB Connect accepts a parameter, which is the name we assigned in the RDB configuration. This will go across the remote system, make a connection to that database, and return an ID number. This ID number is what you're going to use throughout your processing to tell the service program where to process the information. If you wanted to manage two connections at the same time, you could do that. You just need two different IDs to keep track of your multiple uses of the multiple transactions. You'd also need multiple RDB Connect jobs to handle those transactions, okay? Because one connection is allowed per Connect job. So once I try to make my connection, if I make a good connection, I'll get an ID greater than or equal to 0 back. I'll then use that ID number in a command called RDB exec. What exec does is simply execute a given statement on the remote system. So in this case, I'm going to execute a select statement on the remote system. So what that now does is goes across to the remote system, does a select statement, and queues up the results. So now I can choose what I want to do with the results. Now what I'm going to do here is simply fetch the first record. So I fetch next based on the ID number. Now, of course, the ID number then correlates to the select statement I previously did. You'll see on the right hand side of each of these statements I have a field called RC, return code. The return code will either be a 0 or a -1. -1 meaning something failed, a 0 meaning all the transaction processed. So if I did an RDB fetch next and it returned a -1, that of course means there is no more records to read. It'd be like hitting end of file. If it returned a 0, my pointer moved and I grabbed the next record. Okay, so now we have accessed the next record on the remote system. We actually have to pull the data back. There are two ways to retrieve the data. First method is by the field number. It is the position of the field in the select statement. So since we did select asterisk, it's the position of the field in the file. Had we selected 3 fields, it would be from the select statement. So in this case, I'm going to pull field number 1. I'm going to get it as a numeric field, and I'm going to return it into a field in my program called field 1, which is a numeric field. The second field I'm going to grab as a string or character field, and I'm going to return it into a character field. You'll see here in number 4, I'm actually pulling a date. Now the dates always come back as timestamps. So my local field, my internal field, must be a timestamp type. Okay, I'll retrieve it into my timestamp if I need, then I can extract the date or time from that timestamp. The alternate method for retrieving your data is using the field name itself. And we use that by using the RDB associate functions. So associated number, I'd grab from the ID the field order ID. So in this case, it doesn't matter where in the select statement order ID sits. It doesn't matter if it's the first field or the 9th field. It will grab order ID. For maintenance purposes, this is the method we suggest, is using the field names themselves versus the position numbers. Position number is slightly faster than using field names because of the lookup portion of it. Okay. So again, same rules apply. If I'm grabbing a number from the remote system, I need to bring it over as a number. Now everything can be brought back as character data. So if I wish to pull a number from the remote system and bring it into the local system as character, I have that option. Same with date fields. I can bring them in as character. I must use the string-based functions like RDB ASC str to bring in the remote data. You cannot, however, go the other direction and bring in string data as numeric. So please be careful in that situation. So here again, you'll see I did a fetch next. I grabbed the next record based on the ID. I am not checking against the RC. I know I have enough records. Otherwise, you would, at this point, want to say, you'd actually want to say, oh, I'm in display mode. Let's go to edit mode. You'd actually want to say here, if RC was equal to 0. and then of course put a end if at the end. Yes, you can use free format. These examples are not in free format, but you're welcome to use free format if you wish. So in this case, I wouldn't pull the records back unless it actually, or pull the fields back unless it actually fetched a record. One of the other functions is, of course, fetch previous would be like a read previous in RPG. So read next would be like a read, and fetch previous would be like a read previous. The other option would be a fetch absolute, which would be similar to a chain. Here I'm going to grab the fourth record from the result set based on the ID number, and then of course pull back the data that belonged. And the last thing you must do is close your connection. If you do not close your connection, you will tie up the RDB Connect job indefinitely. So you want to make sure you always close your connections. Okay? Let's now talk about the prepared statement. There, in this case, in the previous example, we did just a plain read or a plain select. Nothing dynamic about it. In this case, we're going to do what's called a prepared statement. Prepared statements in SQL have variables. So again, we're going to make our connect like we did in the previous program, but this time instead of using RDB exec, we're going to use RDB prep statement. What prep statement does is it sets up a select statement. You'll see I have here. What's special about this is on the where I put in variables, and that's the question mark. Question mark is a variable. So I've set up my statement, and I've said ship date is going to be equal to something, and so is employee ID, and so is the customer ID. Okay. Now I'm going to come back after I prepared the statement. I'm actually going to set the values of those question marks, and the question marks are assigned in left to right order, a number from 1 to whatever your highest number of question marks are. So in this case, ship dates question mark is the parameter number 1. So ship date is a date field, so we're going to do a set date against parameter number 1, and we're going to set it to an internal variable I have here called ship date. You'll see ship date is a timestamp with a 1996 July 16th date. The second field I'm going to set is employee ID, and I'm going to set it to a numeric of 5. The third field I'm going to set as a string, and I'm going to set it to the parameter VINET. Okay. After I've set all my parameters, I then have to execute my statement, and to do that we use the RDB prep exec. It executes the statement based on the ID number. Now remember, the ID number was assigned at the connection time. Okay. After the statement is the prepared statement is executed, I then can begin fetching records. Now remember, if on, let's say, the prep exec, the RC would come back as a -1, that means the prepared statement did not run. Maybe one of the values did not map correctly. Okay. If the execution actually pulled 0 records, it would still be a clean execution. The fetch next would actually give you a -1 because you opened the file and then you tried to read and the read failed. After fetching my record, I again can pull the data as I desire. Okay, fetching each one. The next thing we're going to talk about is freeing a statement. Once I execute a statement, that is the only open I can have at a time. You can only have one open per ID at a time. Once I finish with that statement that I executed, I can close it by using the free statement command. It frees up the statement that was ran and allows the connection using ID to accept another select statement. So here I've read the records I needed to. I can free my statement ID up, and I can prepare another statement ID. Okay, and I can set new values to those parameters again, and then execute this statement. So I've opened one file, I've selected the records I want out of it. I processed them. I closed that file with a free statement. I then opened another select, maybe on a different file. In this case, I'm using the same table. I then set my parameters and I opened it. I can now fetch records from that table. Okay, so that is a what we call a prepared statement. This comes very handy in the case of character-based fields. The reason being, here I have customer ID equals question mark. If I wanted to hard type the parameter HANAR into this select statement, because of quotation marks, I'd have to basically string quotation marks and the character data together. By using prepared, I don't have to do that. I can simply set it down here, and it saves you the hassle of dealing with the required quotation marks. So prepared statements do come in quite handy. Okay. The third thing we're going to talk about is inserting data, and again we're going to do it using the prepared statement. Now again we're going to prepare the statement. This time we're going to use the SQL command of insert. We're going to insert into the customer's database this time, and we're going to insert each one of the fields that were in the field listing. And of course this must follow again the SQL standard for the remote database. So in a SQL Server, this is the format it must be stated in. If it's a Oracle database, the syntax is slightly different, so please verify with your remote database. So in this case, I'm going to prepare my statement, inserting each one of the fields, and then put a value of question mark on each one, and I can set that value after I prepared my statement. So I prepare it. Now I'm going to step in, and I'm actually going to set each one of the parameters to the proper values. So here I'm setting each one of our data to what it needs to be. And again, because I'm dealing with it as a prepared statement, I don't have to worry about the quotation marks inside of the values. I can then execute it when I'm done. If I want to add another record, because I'm going to use the exact same prepared statement, and this is a insert, the free statement's only needed on select statements. If you're doing inserts, deletes, updates, you don't actually have to free the prepared statement. It's automatically freed once it's completed. So here I'm going to go ahead and add another record. So I simply set my parameters and I execute the next record. I then, don't forget, always at the end, to close your connection to the remote database. So let's go ahead and compile example number 3 here. Okay, compiled. Let's go ahead and run it, and so it's actually going to connect to the remote database and write 2 records to that remote database. Okay, so let's call. The records are actually written over there at this point. So we're going to use, again, our DBU process to show you that those records were actually written over to the remote database. Okay, so again, it's real time. I can insert records. I may have inserted those records based off of data in the System I database. I can use this process to export data from the System I to a remote database. I can also use it, by the way, for update. So that is what RDB Connect can do for you. It is a very, very powerful tool. You can use it, again, for reading records, updating records, inserting records, all on remote databases and all from the System I. It is all the programs are local on the System I. There is no PC needed anywhere. The only thing you need is a connection to that remote database. You may have to consult your firewall administrator to make sure that is available to you. Again, we thank you for attending this webinar, and if you have any questions, please contact our help desk department here at ProData. We're always willing to help you along with your trial of RDB Connect, and when you're ready to have this as a permanent part of your software on your System I, please feel free to contact our sales department. Again, we thank you and have a nice day.